Hi there, welcome back to another in the series of our conversations videos with myself, Scott Brennan. I'm here with my friend Ray Simpson.
Hi
Ray.
everyone, good to see you.
And once again we're back in the prayer room on Holy Island, and we're just continuing our series looking at the way of life of the community of Aidan and Hilda. And we've been using this book to look at 10 particular things. The book's called New Celtic Monasticism for Everyday People, so we encourage you to get a hold of that. This is one of my favourite books that you've written, Ray. So, although you're just about to publish a new one, is that right?
That'll come out within a year, and that'll be A Way of Life for the Third Millennium.
A Way of Life, you heard it here first. Way of Life for the Third Millennium.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we've covered a number of things over the last few months, and today we want to look at the subject of openness to God's Spirit. And you've kind of talked about it in terms of listening skills, haven't you, Ray?
Yes.
So maybe you want to unpack that a little bit. What do you mean by that?
Well, it is in our way of life. We feel that what's happened in our society is similar to what happened as recorded in the Bible in Samuel's day, when there was a famine of hearing the words of God.
Yeah.
And we call it the art of listening has been lost. And I think Jung, the psychologist, said we are so fearful of the catastrophes looming on the horizon that we drown our lives in noise and endless activity. And so we've lost the faculty of listening to the meaning of what's being said and to the deeper truths and insights that are listening to the beauty of the world, the qualities of God being revealed in each person, each situation. So it's a huge lost art, and we have to recover it.
So there's two things I'm hearing you say there particularly that stood out to me. One is that there's an awful lot of distracting noise.
Yeah.
So we're kind of drowning in this noise that comes from all kinds of places.
Most of the social media is an echo chamber of our own effluent.
I see, it's an interesting way of thinking of it. Hopefully what we're producing on social media is not.
No, I said most of it, not all of it. We're redeeming it.
So drowning in noise, it's like background noise, isn't it? And then the second thing is, how do we actually discern what we need to hear amongst all these competing voices? So that's where the art of listening comes into that.
And I think the art of silence, going into a deep silence.
Right.
Silence is not just the absence of noise, it's becoming receptive to the deepest promptings in our own heart and the meaning behind the meaning, so to speak. And we can begin, many people begin by just being quiet, writing down their thoughts in a notebook and testing them. Do these thoughts pass the test of absolute honesty, purity, unselfishness, love? And if they do, we want to put some of them into action. We say, do I get peace in my heart about putting this into action, or am I not getting peace in my heart? And then you gradually boil this down to one or two things, and by their fruits you shall know them. And the same with the thoughts we get. We can sense God is in a thought when it proves fruitful.
And so it sounds like what you're actually describing is a filter system.
A filter system, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so I imagine, you're talking about effluence, but the filter system just keeps that which is pure. Yeah.
And we've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. Why don't we listen twice as much as we talk?
Yes.
But the Celtic Christians also talk about developing the eye of the eagle.
Right.
The eagle was thought in the days of the Bible to be the only bird that could gaze directly into the sun without being blinded.
Yes.
And John the Apostle gazed on the heart of Jesus. And we are trying to improve our ability to gaze, to see the divine behind the human, the divine behind different happenings, so that there's a synchronicity beginning to emerge.
Right. And am I correct that in some of the books like Kells and the Lindisfarne Gospels, they used the eagle
They did.
and bird sort of symbols,
Yes.
symbology to represent John, didn't they?
Yes, they did.
And it was for that reason.
Yes.
Okay. And so that's actually a skill, isn't it? It's not
It is a
something that
skill.
comes easily.
No.
You know, maybe a bit later on we can maybe talk about just some practices to develop that kind of listening skill. Okay, well, in terms of listening then, one of the things that we see in Scripture, which the Celtic Church were quite famous for, was the kind of the art of prophecy.
Yes.
And within your book, in fact, let me just read, this is on the chapter on openness to God's Spirit. When someone takes a vow in the community of Aidan and Hilda, they say, "You have heard the call of the wild goose, the untamable Spirit of God. Be ready for the Spirit to lead you into wild, windy and well-worn places in the knowledge that God will make them places of wonder and welcome." Some great alliteration there. But that's got that kind of prophetic edge to it. Is that what you mean?
Yes, I think we have to be aware that the Bible clearly teaches not everybody is a prophet. And that means most Christians shy off from prophecy. And it's true that in the Old Testament, 90% of the prophets were false prophets.
Right.
And they are today. Because an awful lot of prophecy is people who like magnifying their own voice and projecting their own preconceptions onto other people. So we have to be very careful about this. But it would be tragic if, because of that, we neglect the true New Testament spirit of prophecy, which is basically to see the meaning behind the events that are happening to us, the things that have been spoken to us, what's happening inside our own hearts.
Yes.
And sometimes when we discern something in our own hearts, it is something to share. Often it isn't, but sometimes we realise that we ought to share something with another person or a group or the public.
Yeah. And so when we begin to listen to God in terms of a listening skill, we can call that prophecy, which is a speaking forth, but it's also to do with an internal message, isn't it?
Yes.
And so actually learning to be able to differentiate what's our flesh, what's our spirit, that's very, very key, isn't it?
It's very key.
Yeah.
I mean, Solzhenitsyn said, "One word of truth shall outweigh the whole world."
Wow.
And but he had to be in a prison camp for years and years and years on his own.
And that in some ways is a filter system or a filter of its own, isn't it?
Yes,
because it's dealing with our fleshliness, if you like.
It filtered out what was false in himself.
Yes.
And he could see the world more clearly.
And I've been reading a lot around the desert fathers and mothers recently, and that's why they went to the desert, wasn't it? To tackle some of these inner, motivations and so on, so that they could actually hear God more clearly.
And the words of the desert fathers and mothers ring across the centuries.
They do.
They get beneath the skin. They touch the core of your being. Yeah,
and when Athanasius wrote the life of Antony, it just was like one of the best sellers.
Exactly.
Amazing.
Yeah. So, but it does take time.
Yeah.
And we do need to receive rebuke if we're just projecting our own stuff onto other people and getting our own ego flattered by doing it.
So let me interrupt you there, because how might that work in practice? So if you talked about rebuke, are you talking about some kind of soul friendship or a buddy system or some kind of training?
Well, somebody who should be nameless came into a kitchen of a retreat house, and when on the day off, the wardens were looking at television in the kitchen, and she said, "I rebuke the spirit of something, entertainment or something, or time wasting or something like that." I've forgotten the exact words. And they said, "And we rebuke interfering into our day of rest." Well, that's a silly example, but
it's discerning the spirit behind something.
Discerning the spirit behind something. Yes, that's right. Yes.
Yeah. So you have to be bold sometimes in order to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's not such a silly example then, is it? Because people have an opinion about everything, don't they?
That's right.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
And so you need to have a confidence that you're hearing from God. And what's interesting about that example is they had a way of life that included Sabbath.
Yes.
And so they were able to rebuke false prophecy based on their own principles.
And I think if we have an insight or knowledge that we feel we must share, we should first of all pray about it, find the right time,
Yeah.
and we should only do it if we're loving the person. We
Yes.
should prophesy out of love.
Yes. Well, it says in Corinthians, doesn't it, that prophecy, it should encourage.
Yes.
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 Should build
the
up.
purpose of prophecy is to encourage and build up.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 Okay, so openness to God's Spirit it's multi-layered.
Yes.
It's a skill that includes listening.
Yes.
It probably requires training and soul friendship, things like
Yes.
that.
Yes.
In your book, on the chapter on openness to God's Spirit, you do actually give some applications. So, for example, you said take 10 minutes each day to listen to God. So is that more like a meditation, or how might that work?
For me, I write down the thoughts I get, and it might be a meditation to do with developing my love for God, but it might be to do with things that need to change in my character, in my
So is that more like an examine, or
examine? Yeah.
Yeah.
But it could be to do with something I need to do or say to another person,
Right.
or to put it on the media or whatever. Yeah.
Okay. So they're directive in some way,
Yes.
but they could be to do with you personally or to do with someone else's situation.
Yes.
And that takes sensitivity, doesn't it? Because what God says to us, we need to find out a way to communicate that well to somebody else.
And it may take us years of not prophesying in order to get to that. Elijah had to be taken to a cave and be totally at the end of his tether.
Yes.
And it was only in the deep stillness of the cave that a still small voice came to him
Yeah.
and said, "Go and anoint someone as a king."
Yes. 2 people as a king.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he couldn't have got to that without being willing to go through all these disciplines
Yes.
and privations.
Yes. Yes. He went through quite a deep depression
He did.
and some self-pity.
Yes. So in other words, we've got to learn not to prophesy in order to learn to prophesy
That's
well.
a very profound thought.
Yeah.
And you've actually put down here, meet with a friend to listen to God and share inspirations you have for one another. So that's a kind of training forum,
That
isn't
is,
it?
yes.
And we were saying earlier that it's exciting to see that out there in the UK now there's a number of prophetic schools, and so there are some practical training that we could do, isn't there? There's listening courses,
Yes.
for example.
Yes. I mean, in the Old Testament they had schools of prophets. Elijah had schools of prophets.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very good thing for us to develop schools for listening, schools for prophetic work. Yeah.
And other things like retreats where we practice silence.
Yes.
Building those into our annual
Yes.
rhythms and so on.
And clarifying what are the things that need to be challenged in our society.
Yes, that is part of the prophetic voice, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, there's a lot in there, Ray.
There is a lot.
There's a lot in there.
Yeah.
So we encourage you to, read the book and read other things that are in there. And so thank you once again for joining our conversation, and we will see you again. God bless.
God bless you.